The mining colony Haven 3 floated like a speck of dust in the endless swirl of a gas giant's rings. Its metal domes gleamed faintly under the dim light of a far-off star, a lonely outpost in a galaxy ruled by the Valthor Dominion. The Valthor were tall, insect-like beings with shimmering exoskeletons and minds sharper than any blade. For centuries, they had imposed order on countless worlds, their ships cutting through space like silent predators. To them, every species had a place, most beneath their clawed feet. And then there were the humans. Humans were new to the galaxy, stumbled upon only decades ago by a Valthor scout fleet. They were loud, messy, and stubborn, lacking the sleek technology of other races. The Valthor saw them as little more than beasts, good for digging ore from asteroid fields and hauling it to fuel the Dominion's war machine. On Haven 3, hundreds of humans toiled in the mines, their hands rough from work, their spirits worn but not broken. Among them was Mia, a mechanic with a knack for fixing anything, and her friend Tom, a broad-shouldered man who once fought in Earth's forgotten wars. Together, they kept the colony running, even under the Valthor's cold gaze. Life on Haven 3 wasn't easy. The air was thin, the food was tasteless, and the Valthor overseers watched every move. Their voices buzzed through translators, issuing commands in sharp, clicking tones. That day, though, something changed. A Valthor overseer, its shell glinting green, descended into the main dome. Its mandibles twitched as it spoke. The quota doubles by next cycle. Work faster, or face punishment. The humans froze. Doubling the quota was impossible. The drills were old, the tunnels unstable. Whispers spread like sparks among the workers, anger, fear, and something else. Defiance. Mia wiped grease from her hands and glanced at Tom. His jaw tightened, a flicker of his old soldier's fire in his eyes. "They can't do this," he muttered. "They'll kill us all trying." Mia nodded, her mind already racing. She wasn't one to sit still when pushed. The Valthor might have their fancy ships and rules, but humans had something else, grit. She'd seen it back on Earth, in stories of people who turned scraps into miracles. Now, it was her turn. The overseer lingered, its compound eyes scanning the crowd. It expected submission, like every other species gave. But Mia had an idea. She slipped away to the repair bay, where a busted mining drone sat in pieces. It was supposed to haul ore, but she'd been tinkering with it for weeks. With a few tweaks, she could make it do more than haul. She could make it fight. Tom followed, catching on quick. "What's the plan?" he asked, voice low. Mia grinned. "Distraction. Something loud. Something they won't expect." Hours passed in a blur of wires and bolts. The drone's engine hummed to life, louder than it should have. Mia rigged its fuel line to overload, turning it into a flying bomb. She didn't know if it'd work, but she'd seen enough old vids about crazy stunts to trust her gut. When night fell, or what passed for night in the endless orbiting colony, she and Tom hauled the drone to the edge of the main tunnel. The overseer was still there, barking orders at exhausted workers. Perfect. Mia hit the controls. The drone shot forward, wobbling at first, then screaming toward the overseer's platform. It exploded mid-air with a boom that rattled the dome, showering sparks and metal everywhere. The Valthor screeched, its shell flaring red in panic as it ducked for cover. The humans cheered, a wild, reckless sound that echoed through the tunnels. For a moment, the galaxy's perfect order cracked. Tom grabbed Mia's arm. "You're insane," he said, but he was smiling. She shrugged. They pushed first. Word spread fast. The humans had struck back, small as it was. The overseer survived, but its pride didn't. It sent a signal to the Valthor fleet, a sharp buzz of outrage. By morning, ships appeared on the horizon, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons. The Valthor weren't laughing. They didn't understand what had happened, how a lesser species dared to resist. In their orderly minds, this was a glitch to be crushed. Mia and Tom watched from a cracked window as the fleet loomed closer. The workers gathered, some scared, some angry. "What now?" a woman asked, her voice trembling. Mia didn't hesitate. "We don't stop. They think we're weak. Let's show them we're not." Tom nodded, his soldier's instinct kicking in. They'd need more than a drone next time. They'd need a plan, one the Valthor couldn't predict. As the ships descended, casting shadows over Haven 3, the humans began to whisper. Not of surrender, but of fight. The Valthor had ruled the stars for eons, their empire built on control. Every battle followed a script: declare intent, deploy forces, accept victory. But humans didn't read scripts. They wrote their own, messy and bold. Mia's drone was just the start, a spark in the dark. The fleet's arrival wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Somewhere in those tunnels, a fire was growing, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. The Valthor fleet hung above Haven 3 like a storm waiting to break. Their ships gleamed with cold precision, each one a masterpiece of engineering designed to enforce the Dominion's will. Below, inside the colony's dusty domes and twisting tunnels, the humans moved fast. The drone explosion had lit a fuse, and now the Valthor were tightening their grip. Enforcer drones, small, buzzing machines with needle-sharp claws, patrolled the corridors, their red eyes scanning for trouble. The overseers issued new orders: no rest, no talk, just work. But humans didn't obey like that. They adapted. Mia crouched in the repair bay, surrounded by scattered tools and flickering lights. The air smelled of burnt metal from the drone stunt, but her mind was already on the next step. Tom stood nearby, keeping watch, his big frame blocking the doorway. "They're locking everything down," he said, voice low. "Drones everywhere. We can't move like this." Mia didn't look up from the tangle of wires she was stripping. "Then we make them blind," she replied. She'd seen the drones' patterns, predictable, mechanical. If she could jam their signals, they'd have room to breathe. A girl slipped into the bay, her steps quiet but quick. Lila was young, barely out of her teens, with bright eyes and a head full of ideas. She'd grown up on Haven 3, tinkering with tech the Valthor ignored. "I found something," she whispered, holding up a cracked data pad. "Their drones use a relay signal. If we overload it, they crash." Mia grinned. "Perfect. Let's give them a headache." Together, the three of them got to work. Lila hacked the pad, Mia rewired a busted comm unit, and Tom hauled scrap to build a makeshift jammer. It wasn't pretty, but it didn't need to be, it just needed to work. Outside, the Valthor commander, Krelvor, stood on the bridge of his lead ship. His shell shimmered gold, a mark of rank, and his mandibles clicked with irritation. The human's little stunt with the drone had embarrassed him in front of his superiors. He'd expected them to cower after that, like every other species did when faced with Dominion might. Instead, they'd gone quiet, too quiet. Primitive creatures, he buzzed to his second-in-command. They lacked the discipline for real resistance. "We'll crush this nonsense soon." His officer nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in its eyes. The humans weren't acting like the data said they should. Back in the tunnels, the jammer hummed to life. Mia flipped the switch, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. Above, the enforcer drones twitched, then dropped like stones, clattering against the metal floors. Workers froze, then cheered, their voices bouncing off the walls. Tom clapped Mia on the shoulder. "That's one for us," he said. But Mia wasn't celebrating yet. "It's a start. We need weapons now. They won't sit still for long." She'd spent years fixing mining gear, drills, cutters, haulers. If she could turn a drone into a bomb, she could turn tools into something deadlier. The group grew. A handful of workers joined them, drawn by the noise and the hope of fighting back. There was Ben, a wiry man who knew the tunnels better than anyone, and Tara, a cook who'd once melted a pot to patch a wall. They weren't soldiers, but they were tough, shaped by years of hard living. Tom took charge, splitting them into teams. "We hit fast, then hide," he said. "They've got numbers. We've got surprise." Mia and Lila worked on the gear, drills became spears, cutters became blades. It was rough, messy work, but it felt right. Humans didn't need perfection, they needed grit. Their first strike came at dusk, when the gas giant's rings cast long shadows over the colony. Ben led them through a side tunnel, quiet as ghosts. The target was a drone recharge station, small, but vital to the Valthor's control. Mia had rigged a fuel canister to blow, and Tom carried it, muscles straining. They crept close, the hum of the station growing louder. Then, chaos. Tom hurled the canister, and Mia sparked it with a jury-rigged igniter. The explosion lit up the tunnel, shredding the station and sending drones scattering. The team vanished into the dark before the Valthor could react, cheers muffled by the roar behind them. Krelvor felt the tremor from his ship. His claws tightened on the console as reports flooded in, another attack, another loss. "How?" he demanded. His officer hesitated. "They used mining tools, sir. Modified them." "We didn't expect," Krelvor cut him off with a sharp click. "They're animals playing tricks. Deploy more drones. End this." But deep down, a sliver of unease crept in. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They were fighting like something else, something wild. In the tunnels, the humans regrouped. Sweat streaked their faces, but their eyes burned with fire. "They'll hit back harder now," Tom warned. Mia nodded, already thinking ahead. "Good. Let them come. We'll be ready." Lila piped up, her voice shaky but excited. "There's something else. I heard the old miners talking, a ship, buried deep in the lower levels. Crashed years ago. Alien, but not Valthor." The group went silent. A ship meant power. It meant a chance. They moved fast, descending into the colony's depths. The air grew thick, the walls rough and unpolished. Ben guided them, his memory sharp despite the years. After hours of winding paths, they found it, a hulking wreck half buried in rock. Its hull was dented, its tech ancient, but it was intact. Lila ran her hands over the controls, her curiosity lighting up the gloom. "It's old, but it's got juice," she said. "I can figure it out." Mia looked at Tom, then back at the ship. "If we get this working, we're not just hiding anymore. We're fighting." Above, Krelvor prepared his next move. He'd underestimated the humans once, he wouldn't again. He ordered a full assault, ships descending with weapons primed. The humans were a nuisance, nothing more. He'd prove it. But in the tunnels, Mia's team hauled the ship free, piece by piece. They didn't know its limits, didn't care. They'd make it theirs, the way humans always did, by breaking it down and building it back up, better. The Valthor thought they understood war, clean, calculated, controlled. They'd never met a species that thrived on chaos. As the fleet closed in, the humans worked, their hands dirty, their spirits unbroken. The ship's engines flickered, a faint hum growing stronger. Lila laughed, a sound of pure joy. "It's alive," she shouted. Mia smiled, fierce and ready. "Then let's give them something to fear." The battle was coming, and Haven 3 was no longer just a colony, it was a spark about to ignite. The Valthor fleet loomed, confident in their power. They didn't see the trap being set below, didn't feel the shift in the air. Humans weren't done yet. They were just getting started. The derelict ship sat in the belly of Haven 3's deepest tunnel, its hull scratched and scarred from a crash long forgotten. Dust swirled around it as the humans worked, their breath fogging in the cold air. The faint hum of its engines was a heartbeat, growing steadier with every tweak Lila made. She knelt by an open panel, her fingers dancing over alien circuits she barely understood. "This isn't like anything I've seen," she said, her voice a mix of awe and excitement. "But it's talking to me. I can make it listen." Mia stood nearby, welding a cracked exhaust port shut with a salvage torch. "Talk fast, then," she replied. "They're coming." Above, the Valthor fleet tightened its noose around the colony. Krelvor's golden shell glinted as he paced his ship's bridge, his mandibles clicking with impatience. The humans' latest attack, blowing up the drone station, had stung more than he'd admit. His superiors were watching now, their messages sharp with demands for results. "They're cornered," he told his crew, his voice a low buzz. "No weapons, no ships. We end this today." The plan was simple: bombard the domes, flush the humans out, and crush them. It was how the Dominion always won: overwhelming force, no mercy. But the humans weren't waiting to be crushed. Down in the tunnels, Tom took charge of the group. He wasn't a soldier anymore, not officially, but the old instincts never left. He lined up the workers, Ben, Tara, and a dozen others, and handed out the makeshift weapons Mia had built. "We don't have much," he said, his voice steady. "But we've got enough. Stay sharp, hit hard, disappear. That's how we survive." They nodded, fear in their eyes but fire in their hearts. They weren't trained, weren't ready, but they were willing. That was enough. Lila cracked the ship's controls just as the first tremors hit. The Valthor had started their attack, lobbing energy blasts at the upper domes. The tunnel shook, dust raining from the ceiling. "Got it!" Lila shouted, flipping a switch. The ship's lights flared, and a low rumble filled the air. Mia climbed aboard, running her hands over the pilot's seat. It was alien, curved, strange, but she'd flown rigs back on Earth, patched together from junk. This wasn't so different. "Can it fight?" she asked. Lila grinned. "It's got cannons. Old, but they'll fire." Tom hauled himself in, taking the gunner's spot. "Then let's move." They dragged the ship free of the rock, its hull scraping against the tunnel walls. It wasn't sleek or fast, but it was theirs. Mia punched the throttle, and the engines roared, shaking the ground. The group cheered as it lurched upward, breaking through a collapsed shaft into the open air of Haven 3. The gas giant loomed overhead, its rings a glowing backdrop to the chaos unfolding. Valthor ships dotted the sky, their weapons raining fire. The domes below cracked and burned, but the humans weren't hiding anymore. Mia didn't hesitate. She aimed the ship straight at the nearest Valthor vessel, a mid-sized enforcer bristling with drones. "Hold on," she yelled. The ship groaned as she pushed it hard, slamming into the enforcer's side. Metal screamed, sparks flew, and the alien craft spun out of control, crashing into a shattered dome below. Tom fired the cannons, wild bursts that punched holes in another ship's hull. The Valthor hadn't expected this, an old wreck tearing through their ranks like a mad beast. On the bridge, Krelvor staggered as his ship rocked from the shockwave. "What is that?" he demanded, staring at the battered ship weaving through his fleet. His officer's eyes widened. "It's one of ours, ancient, pre-Dominion. They've reactivated it." Krelvor's shell flared red with fury. "Impossible. They don't have the skill." But the evidence was there, carving a path of chaos below. The humans didn't just have skill, they had something worse. They had nerve. The fight was messy, brutal, and loud. Mia flew like she was dodging storms back on Earth, unpredictable and fearless. Tom's shots weren't precise, but they didn't need to be. Every hit rattled the Valthor, threw off their perfect formations. Lila patched the ship as they went, rerouting power when a cannon overheated, laughing through the jolts. "This is nuts," she shouted, and Mia laughed back. "Nuts works." The workers on the ground joined in, using their makeshift spears to take down stray drones that fell from the sky. Haven 3 wasn't a battlefield, it was a riot. Krelvor regained his composure, his claws slashing through the air as he barked orders. "Focus fire. Destroy that ship." His fleet adjusted, beams of searing light converging on the human craft. Mia yanked the controls, spinning them out of the worst of it, but the ship took hits. A wing shredded, and smoke poured from the engines. "We can't take much more," Tom warned, his voice tight. Mia's jaw set. "We don't have to. We just need to make them blink." She had an idea, crazy, reckless, human. She veered toward a cluster of Valthor ships, venting fuel from a ruptured tank. "Lila, spark it," she shouted. Lila didn't question it, she grabbed a live wire and stabbed it into the fuel line. A fireball erupted behind them, engulfing 2 enemy ships in flames. The Valthor scattered, their orderly lines breaking apart. Krelvor's voice crackled over the comms, a rare edge of panic in his buzz. "Regroup. Now." The humans weren't winning, not yet, but they were surviving. The ship limped back to the tunnels, its hull glowing with heat. Mia landed it hard, the impact jarring their bones. They stumbled out, coughing but alive. The workers rushed to them, faces streaked with soot and hope. "They're running." Ben yelled, pointing at the sky. The Valthor fleet hadn't retreated, not fully, but they'd pulled back, stunned by the chaos. Mia wiped sweat from her brow, her mind racing. They'd hurt the Valthor, shown they could bite. But it wasn't enough. "We need to tell everyone," she said. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Tell who?" She turned to Lila. "Can you hack their comms? Send a message, everywhere." Lila's eyes lit up. "Oh, I can do that." She dove back into the ship, pulling wires and tapping keys. Minutes later, she had it, a signal strong enough to bounce across the galaxy. Mia leaned into the mic, her voice rough but fierce. "This is Haven 3. We're humans, and we're not bowing to anyone. The Valthor came for us, and we're still here. If you're out there, if you're tired of their rules, stand up. Fight back." We did. She cut the feed, and silence fell. Then Lila whooped. "It's out there. Every colony, every ship, they'll hear it." The group erupted, a raw, defiant cheer echoing through the tunnels. Above, Krelvor heard it too. His shell darkened to a furious crimson. "A message," he snarled. "They dare." His officer shifted uneasily. "It's spreading, sir. Other colonies are picking it up." Krelvor slammed a claw on the console. "Then we end them before it grows. Call the Armada." He wouldn't let this stand. The humans were a spark, and he'd drown it in fire. But the spark was already spreading. Across the galaxy, alien ears twitched, and human hearts stirred. On Haven 3, Mia looked at her crew, dirty, tired, unbroken. "They're scared," she said, a slow smile spreading. "Good." The ship smoked behind them, a battered symbol of what they could do. The Valthor thought they'd crush a nuisance. Instead, they'd woken something bigger. The fight wasn't over. The Armada was coming, and Haven 3 was a speck against its might. But humans didn't care about odds. They cared about the next move, the next chance. Mia, Tom, and Lila stood together, the gas giant's rings glowing through the cracked dome above. They'd started a fire, and the galaxy was about to feel the heat. The air on Haven 3 buzzed with tension as the humans prepared for the storm they'd unleashed. Mia's message had ripped through the galaxy like a shout in the dark, and now the echoes were coming back. In distant colonies, alien slaves paused their work, whispering about the humans who defied the Valthor. On trading outposts, merchants replayed the broadcast, their voices low with wonder. Even some Dominion officers, safe in their gleaming ships, felt a shiver they couldn't name. The humans weren't just fighting, they were inspiring. And that made them dangerous. Below, in the tunnels, the derelict ship smoked and groaned, its hull patched with scavenged metal. Mia stood by it, hands on her hips, staring at the flickering engines. They'd pushed it hard in the last fight, and it showed. "Can we get her up again?" she asked. Lila poked her head out from a tangle of wires, her face smudged with oil. "Maybe. She's tough, but she's old. We'll need more juice." Tom hefted a crate of salvaged fuel cells, his arms straining. "This is all we've got. Better make it count." The group nodded, their resolve solid as the rock around them. They didn't have much, but they'd never had much. That hadn't stopped them yet. Above, the sky darkened as the Valthor armada arrived. Krelvor had called in every ship he could, hulking destroyers, swift cruisers, a fleet built to crush worlds. His golden shell gleamed under the bridge lights, but his eyes were hard with fury. The humans' broadcast had humiliated him, turned a simple cleanup into a galactic spectacle. "They think they've won," he buzzed to his crew. "They've only delayed their end. Wipe them out. Leave nothing." The ships moved into position, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. This wasn't a skirmish anymore, it was war. In the tunnels, the humans felt the first rumbles. Dust fell, lights flickered, and the ground shook as Valthor bombs struck the upper domes. "They're here," Ben said, his voice tight. He'd seen enough raids to know what came next. Terra gripped her makeshift spear, her knuckles white. "Let's give them a welcome, then." Mia climbed into the ship, settling into the pilot's seat. "Everyone ready?" she called. The crew piled in, Tom at the guns, Lila on the controls, the others bracing for the ride. The engine sputtered, then roared. It wasn't a smooth takeoff, but it was enough. The ship burst from the tunnels, clawing its way into the sky. The Valthor fleet loomed, a wall of metal and fire, but Mia didn't flinch. She flew straight at them, weaving through blasts that lit the air like lightning. Tom fired the cannons, each shot a desperate punch against the enemy's armor. The ship shook, pieces tearing off, but it held together, barely. "We're a target." Lila shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "Good," Mia shot back. "Let them chase us." She had a plan, wild and messy, the kind humans loved and aliens feared. Krelvor watched from his bridge, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. The human ship darted through his fleet like a gnat, dodging shots that should have vaporized it. "Focus fire," he ordered, but the humans were too fast, too erratic. Mia pushed the ship into a spin, venting what little fuel they had left. "Lila, light it up," she yelled. Lila sparked the trail, and a blazing cloud erupted behind them, swallowing a Valthor cruiser in flames. The fleet faltered, ships veering to avoid the chaos. Krelvor's claws dug into his console. "They're mad," he hissed. But madness was winning. On the ground, the workers fought too. Ben led a team through the tunnels, setting traps with scavenged explosives, old drill charges rigged to blow. Terra hurled a spear at a landing drone, pinning it to the dirt. They weren't soldiers, but they moved like a pack, fierce and free. Every drone they downed was a win, every blast a shout back at the Valthor. The colony burned around them, but they kept going, fueled by a stubborn will no alien could break. Mia's ship took hit after hit, sparks flying inside the cockpit. "We're losing her." Tom yelled, his cannon jammed with heat. Mia gritted her teeth. One more trick. She aimed for a gap in the fleet, a tight squeeze between two destroyers. "Hold on." The ship screamed as she threaded it through, scraping holes on both sides. The Valthor ships fired, missing her and hitting each other instead. Metal groaned, and one destroyer listed, crashing into its neighbor. The fleet's perfect order shattered, ship spinning out of control. Krelvor roared, a sound no translator could soften. Enough. End them. But his fleet was in disarray, commanders shouting over each other. The humans weren't supposed to do this, fight with nothing, win with chaos. Mia pulled the ship back, its engines coughing smoke. We've got their attention, she said, voice hoarse. Now we finish it. Lila patched a comm line, broadcasting again. Haven 3 still stands, she said, her words crackling across the stars. We're not done. Who's with us? The signal went out, a dare to the galaxy. The Valthor pressed harder, but the humans wouldn't break. Mia crashed the ship into a landing bay, abandoning it to fight on foot. They grabbed what they could, tools, spears, anything, and ran into the tunnels. The Valthor followed, drones pouring in, but the humans knew the ground. Ben's traps exploded, collapsing passages on the invaders. Terra's team ambushed from the shadows, quick and brutal. Mia and Tom held a choke point, swinging pipes like clubs, their breaths ragged but defiant. Krelvor's patience snapped. Retreat, he ordered, the word bitter on his tongue. His fleet pulled back, battered and confused, leaving Haven 3 scarred but standing. He stared at the burning colony below, his shell dull with shame. This isn't over, he muttered. He'd return with more, but for now, the humans had won. The armada limped away, its power cracked by a ragtag crew and a broken ship. The humans emerged from the tunnels, exhausted but alive. The domes smoked, the ground was torn, but they stood tall. Mia looked at Tom and Lila, then at the others, Ben, Terra, the workers who'd fought beside them. We did it, she said, her voice soft but sure. Lila grinned, her eyes bright. They're scared of us now. Tom nodded, wiping blood from a cut on his arm. They should be. Word of Haven 3 spread fast. The galaxy hummed with it, tales of humans who turned junk into victory, who laughed in the face of doom. Other colonies took notice, their own whispers growing louder. The Valthor tightened their grip elsewhere, but cracks showed in their empire. Fear crept into their ranks, a fear of the unpredictable, the unbreakable. Humans weren't just a nuisance anymore, they were a threat. On Haven 3, the survivors gathered under the gas giant's rings, the sky bruised but beautiful. They'd lost much, their homes, their ship, but they'd gained more. A spark had become a flame, and it wouldn't die. Mia picked up a charred tool, turning it in her hands. They'll come back, she said. Tom shrugged. Let them. We'll be ready. Lila laughed, already sketching plans for the next fight in the dirt. The Valthor thought they'd snuffed out a rebellion. Instead, they'd lit a legend. Across the stars, alien species spoke of humans in hushed tones, not as beasts, but as something else. Something wild, clever, and fearless. Haven 3 was just the start, a name that would echo through time. The day humans went to war wasn't a day to mourn, it was a day to fear. And the galaxy would never be the same.